What's up, my people? It's your favorite light M Boogie in this thing. Welcome to another amazing episode of the Can't Be Broken podcast, where we are shining light on the darkness that is domestic violence and abuse. Guess what it is? Season 2! Yeah! I know I've been getting so excited with y'all. Last year, I started this podcast in January, and I didn't know what I was doing, what it was going to look like, how I was going to make it do, where the guests was going to come from. Y'all ain't here for all that, though. Y'all ain't here for all that. I just had to let you know why I always be so excited to say that it's been season 2, like a full year of dropping an episode every Thursday. And here we are, round 2. Let's go. Anyways, if you've never been here before, welcome to the show. We got 3 simple goals: to educate, empower, and encourage. We are here to educate anyone who's never been in abusive relationships or doesn't quite understand how someone finds themselves in abusive relationships, why they stay in abusive relationships. You gonna find out today. We are here to empower all of our survivors to stand up and share your story without shame, fear, guilt, or judgment, because you are strong, you are powerful, and your voice deserves to be heard. And to anyone who is currently suffering in silence, listen, you are not alone. You are not crazy. Abuse is not normal. Your feelings are valid, and despite how it may look and feel in this very moment, there is always a way out, and we encourage you to safely seek support. So y'all come on with me, because we about to rise above these insecurities, release the burdens of shame and guilt, and revive our God-given power, purpose, and passion the confidence way. So we about to light it up. Y'all know what it is. I have to say again, season 2. I'm so excited about it. And we have another, as always, amazing guest here on our show to share with you her experiences of what she went through, what she lived through, and to, of course, help someone along the way. Put your hands together. I don't even know if you need your helmet, elbow, knee pads, side protection, or whatever, but just have it handy, because we never know. Put your hands together for Miss Kristi in the building. Pew, 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 pew.
Hello.
Kristi, I always joke because I'm season 2 in and I still don't have a soundboard. So I just
I
I
thought you
used
would
the
add
voice
that
God
later.
gave me. But Kristi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Doing well.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you so much. This is our privilege. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with you, in the hopes that we are able to shine light on what you experienced, and also to help educate people that abuse comes in all types of
Yeah.
forms. There's no cookie cutter abuse. Oftentimes it seems like it's cookie cutter abusers, but the
Mm.
abuse comes off differently. And so by all of us coming together collectively to share our stories, we're able to allow people to be like, okay, wait a minute, that really isn't right. I felt like it wasn't right, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
And then you see that we're not alone. So thank you for your courage. Thank you for your transparency, your openness to share what you went through.
Well, I appreciate the ask and the opportunity. And like we were talking just a few minutes ago, I really hope that, something that I went through may help somebody else.
Yes, I believe it will. When it happens, I don't know, but I do know it will. I have faith. I feel like God led this podcast anyway.
I
So,
agree.
God, all I got to do is show up and do what I'm supposed to do, and God gonna show up and do what He's supposed to do.
Absolutely.
Woo! With that being said, my first question is usually always this, because I'm curious. It wasn't my experience, but growing up, do you feel like there was ever any kind of abuse, physical, mental, verbal, that you saw, whether in your household or in your family or at school or church or anything like that?
Absolutely. I would say that um I don't think I realized it so much growing up, maybe a little bit, but after relationship and stuff like that and therapy and things, you start to dig back through and I can definitely see how I was just set up to fall for a
Wow.
narcissist. I really was. I was prime for the picking. And I mean, I don't want to bash my parents or anything like that. I grew up in a, two-parent household.
Hmm.
My parents sacrificed a lot for me and my sister. But their relationship was not good, and there was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of no like hitting of anybody, but
Hmm.
things could get very escalated for sure. And it was scary at times. And you learn what to accept from other people. And then on top of that, you lay the religious part on top of that. I was raised in a very legalistic denomination, and that more probably than my parents. Um, you know, I have said before, I wish the church had spent as much time teaching me how to like love myself and to give myself grace and to and these other things as they did sexual purity, about all the purity
Mm.
stuff. I they nailed that down, but
Oh my
there's so
God,
many
yeah.
other things they missed, and it, I again, I know that I had a lot of people in my life that loved me. I had great, I come from a good family. I'm not saying that
Hmm.
I don't, but no family's perfect. No parents
Right.
are perfect. But I can definitely see where, um, you know, just certain things set me up to fall
Hmm.
exactly for the love bombing and all that. And I was very sheltered, as far as, my parents and denomination we grew up in. It's the secular versus the, spiritual and
Hmm.
religious, and we have to separate those. We can't intermingle, and so, but when you go out in the world, you're you're dating amongst people who might not be, exactly that, or they come right out of your same environment, but they really aren't the same as you. And that's kind of what happened to me. I mean, my ex and his family, very churched. He grew up the same way
Hmm.
I did. Um, but we are not the same.
Right.
So, but yeah, I can definitely tell looking back how, I was not through intentionality of my parents,
Hmm.
but just the sheltering and not allowing me to date a lot and to experience, like, heartbreak, or, I'm not going to, experiencing maybe a bad relationship and just, oh, I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm not going to put up with that. Didn't have any of that. Um, and then just other things that, you know, just set me up, I think, for somebody like him for sure.
I got you. Do you feel like you and your mom had an open relationship? So, for instance, if you had previous boyfriends or you were dating and there were certain things that you were like curious about, as far as, is this, like, you can always tell, especially out after you're out of it, you're like, oh yeah, that was a flag. Because I can
Yeah.
remember when I was dating Harper over here, I was like, that's not right. But I let it slide. I let it
Hmm.
pass. I was like, well, it's not that big of a deal. Do you feel
Yeah.
like you and your mom had a kind of relationship where while you were dating as a young woman or a young girl, that you could go to her about things that kind of that your body was saying, nah, you don't want to do this, but your mom was like, well, maybe it's not that bad.
Um, well, there really wasn't much dating. Like
Okay.
I was told my growing up, when you get 16, you can date. And then
Yep.
it was like when I turned 16, they were like, you can't date now. And it seemed like from 16 to 18, my dad worked away in other states. And so it was mainly my mom, me and my sister. And it seemed like my mom, I'm the firstborn. And so
Hmm.
it seemed like the more that I should be stepping away and being my own person and turning into an adult and making my own decisions and things like that, the tighter the grip got. And so our relationship was not good from in it just wasn't good. I mean, I love her, she loved me,
Yeah.
and all of that, but there wasn't that. I didn't feel like I could just go to her with for anything. And my parents are very strict, very strict. And
Hmm.
so when you went to them, it was more about rules instead of a relationship. And it was more
Mm.
about, how does what you're talking about or what you're asking about line up with what we believe in our rules are, versus, hey, I know how you're feeling. I've felt that way too.
Mm.
There's a, you know, so there just wasn't a lot of relationship. And
Yes.
again, you know, the rules kept me out of a lot of trouble. I can say
Hmm.
that because so there was some protection through that. I don't want to bash all of it, but
Yeah.
I really wish that there had been a relationship. And I think they do too, but I think they look back now, probably. I don't think they would ever say that to me, maybe, but
Hmm.
I think they look back now and they probably would do some things different. They definitely did some things after I left home. The way they finished with my sister was way different than
Yeah.
how they did with me. And I think they took some of, the problems that we had, and they're like, okay, let's try not to repeat that, and so
Yeah.
I do think that there was a better situation there, um but yeah, that we didn't have the greatest relationship. But
Mm.
what you're talking about when you look back, I didn't know the word narcissism. I didn't
Me either.
know what that meant. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
what a red flag was.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much because I mean, I met him when I was 17. So
Really?
yeah, and so I wasn't stupid, but
It.
I just had not had very little dating experience, and what
Yeah.
dating experience I had had was very controlled and
Yeah.
very, I could only date certain people, and they had to be from church, or they had
Mm-hmm.
to be in, religious, setting type of thing. Um, so I just think there's the lack of not being able to be in some relationships and
Yeah.
to, I didn't grow up with a brother in the household. I didn't know much about guys and boys and how they operate and stuff. And, here's me who's been taught to be honest, to be
Mm-hmm.
upfront, to be caring, to be loving, all the things that Christ is. I've been taught to go do that. And so that's what I went into that relationship with, is that
Mm-hmm.
I'm honest. And if you're showing me that you like me, you're honest too, right? Like, that's the sheltered environment that I was coming from. And
Right.
nobody ever told me that, not everybody that comes to you, acting like they care and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
really means it, and I couldn't even, you know, fathom that. Why would somebody waste their time and their energy to come talk to me and stuff if you really don't care about me, if you really don't,
Say that
because I
again.
grew up in an environment where the people who were being kind and loving and nice to me really truly meant that,
Yeah.
and so I went to a Christian school, I
Mm-hmm.
went to church,
Mm-hmm.
all my friends went to church. Most of them went to Christian school. I was very, very sheltered from the world. And there is
Yeah.
a blessing in that, but there's also you leave your kid, and I if you haven't discussed some topics with them
Mm-hmm.
and let them experience some things, you're leaving them open to a narcissist and that love bombing and stuff like that. And if you pile on top of that, that there's not a good relationship with the parents where you feel like
Yeah.
you can come and talk to them, you're you're open to that. You also take the dad, part of it too. If your dad's not in the home, or if he's, like in the case of mine, I mean, he was away working in other states and stuff. So I mean, he was home at times, but you know, again, not a close relationship. We didn't just pick up the phone and talk to each other. And my dad is very provider mindset. And so, he goes to work and he does all the tough things for the family and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then that's it. That's my job. That's what I'm supposed to do. And, my dad would protect me with his life. I know he would. He would help me if I needed it financially or anything like that.
Mhm.
But, growing up, we just, my dad wasn't taking me on little daddy daughter dates or,
Mhm.
doing anything like really special,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And so again, you leave this person open to a guy that can step in and is going to do that. Because every little girl wants,
Mhm.
that kind of relationship, that love, to be showered affection, attention, flowers, candy, all the things. Um, and when you're not getting that at all, basically during life. And then, you know, you're wide open when you
Yeah.
take all the other aspects that I've said, you're sheltered, you're not allowed to date very much. And if you are allowed to date, it's pretty much a mirror of you, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so if somebody, we know the church is um, a breeding ground, it seems like, for narcissists to come in. And so and to be uh in that. So I mean, like, even though you might try to shelter somebody and tell them, even if you told your kid, hey, you can only date somebody from church, well,
Mm.
what are the
Mm.
odds that, you know I
Oh
met
my
mine in
goodness.
church? So
Oh my
um
goodness.
and everybody doesn't raise their children the way that you do.
Right.
um and it was different growing up when I did. It seemed like to me, I grew up in a small town, so it
Mhm.
seemed like more people raise their family like my parents did versus like
Mhm.
today. Everybody seems
Yeah.
to have a different opinion on different things. And so it's, very different, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, you were so you worded that very well. A breeding ground because and why I don't know.
Yeah,
I was
I
just
don't
talking to
either.
someone earlier today about a mutual guy that we know, not dating, but in a position to hire people for certain jobs and things like that. And she was just saying how ever since she started, he started trying to get her to do certain, like a job, get her
Hmm.
jobs and things like that. She's like, he's always trying to get, like, he's trying to get in my drawers.
Yeah,
And I said, you know what? That was the first time I ever talked to anybody who said that. But I was like, he always struck me as the type that would abuse his power, like very
mhm,
friendly, very charismatic. I'm looking out for you. I can hook you up.
yeah,
But I don't know telling how many people he done slept with. No
yeah,
judgment to how you
yeah,
live your life. But the same is in the church because they have a lot of men in the church have this God complex.
yeah,
And a lot of men in the church are ordained pastors and ministers that weren't called to be ordained
right.
pastors and
Yeah,
ministers, or
yeah,
deacons who weren't called to be deacons.
yeah,
And so now they're in the church all the time, seeing all the women, and because that's who goes to church mostly, anyways.
yeah,
And it's just easy. It's like you said, breeding grounds, an infestation, easy place to take advantage of someone who's spiritually open, who
mhm,
is hurting, trying
yeah,
to heal from trauma,
yeah,
which is the plate, right? You go to church for healing, and it's easy for someone who's vulnerable to fall for someone who seems like they got it all together and they
yeah.
don't.
I think it's kind of two, well, it's a couple things, but two things that
Hmm.
stand out to me is, you know, um, I think that there is there's a lack of accountability when
Correct.
it comes to ministers and deacons and things like that. I think that when I was growing up, if you couldn't be divorced and be a pastor.
Hmm.
My ex today is on his third marriage and he's in a pulpit. And I don't agree with that. But if you had taken this church 20 or 30 years ago, they would have never let him in in
Hmm.
their pulpit. But today, um, I think we're seeing more, obviously, more of a shift to like non-denominational type churches. So these
Hmm.
smaller, especially in these rural towns, smaller denominational churches, they're desperate for a pastor. And
Hmm.
if you are a younger man or you look younger and you're enthusiastic and you come in with the cute wife and she's dressed
Hmm.
right and all that kind of stuff and everything, and the second thing is the church is doing the same thing that like I was. You come with an open heart, you want to love everybody, treat everybody the same, and so you welcome everybody in. You think that they're coming to church for the same thing, to worship God, to draw
Yeah.
closer to him, to be a part of the family, of
Yeah.
God. And it's just the church, I think, is really overall in a total has been taken advantage of. I don't know if you ever research, but I read a lot about and hear a lot about back in the 80s and 90s and stuff, the church, the sexual abuses that are going on from pastors and other men in the church and stuff
Hmm.
like that. And I think about even some of my own experiences, not sexual, but just things that some men would say, and there are
Yeah.
people men in the church that people would, and I told my dad that the other day. Well, it's been a couple weeks ago now, and I said something about, you'd be shocked if I told you some of the things that men that you probably would respect. If I just told you things they said, and they probably would say they didn't mean anything by it, but it was
Hmm.
inappropriate. You know,
Hmm.
and I think it happens a lot. I think, and we as women, we don't rush to um, I think we give the benefit of the doubt a lot of times, and
Hmm.
um, we let it go. We don't just, run. But I think it's twofold. I think it's just church people being open heart and good hearted, and I think it's just lack of accountability as um, churches get more desperate for,
Hmm.
you know, pastors, and it's easy to get a pastor ordination
Oh
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very easy to do
Anybody
that.
can be ordained.
And people don't background check their pastors. They
Right.
just don't. And I saw that growing up and I've seen it today. When we talk about my ex, I mean, nobody called me for my side of the story of what ended in our marriage, and it had only been 3 years. I mean, how do you go from being a pastor to not being a pastor and divorcing and then back to being a pastor with a new
Hmm.
wife in 3 years? Where have you gone for, you know, um, accountability
Hmm.
or therapy or
Yeah.
counseling or
Yep.
whatever,
Yep.
and so, nobody called me, nobody's checking up on anything.
Hmm.
And so it's just accountability is the big part of it. Big part of it.
I think this has been going on long before non-denominational
Oh yeah.
churches.
Oh yeah.
But, even way back then,
Yeah.
stuff was real extra hush hush. So y'all met when you were 17.
I was 17 and he was 23. Yeah.
Kristi.
Yeah. I was almost 18. I mean, it was very close to me being 18, but still.
Hold on. So you go from this two-parent household that's really strict, law-abiding, follow the church, like you have a small dating pool because we don't want you to date really anyways, to
Hmm.
being 17. And did y'all meet when you were 17 or did you meet before you were 17?
We met when I was 17.
And you met when you were 17. Where did y'all
Mhm.
meet?
At church.
He's 23.
Hmm.
What does your mom say? Because your dad is in and out. He's off working and doing things like that.
Yeah.
What does your mom say when you're like, hey, I'm interested in so and so from church and I think we're going to get to know each other? Or did y'all even have that conversation?
Well, the um so they had already decided they didn't like him before me and
Hmm.
him were even, the first time I saw him, I thought he was much older than what he was. And so I was just like, he's too old for me.
Hmm.
And he had a child from his previous marriage.
So
And
wait, so when you met him for the first time, he had already been married once
hmm. Yeah,
and had a kid.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So if we back up a little bit, he was raised in church just like I was, but we
Hmm.
took different paths. And
Hmm.
so he got into drugs and alcohol
Hmm.
was in that scene. He got into trouble. And during being in jail and all of that, he gave his life back to the Lord. And
Hmm.
so when he came to the church, that's when I met him. And so at this point in his life, when you get in trouble, all your friends abandon you. So he really had nobody. And I was part of the youth in our church
Hmm.
was a age range. It was
Yeah.
16 year olds on up to probably there was probably other 21, 22. Some of
Yeah.
those guys were probably 21, 22 years old or whatever. But I mean, like, we're all looking at each other like we're brothers and sisters. We're not, none of us are dating each other. Nothing like that.
Hmm.
And so he just kind of naturally got lumped into things we were doing just because, I mean, we had a young couple in our church that, you know, I guess you call them youth leaders or
Hmm.
whatever. And so basically we were at their house every Sunday night after church, every Wednesday night after church. We had a sand pit volleyball net in their backyard. We
Hmm.
played volleyball all the time. We'd order pizza, we just all hung out. We were all together
Yeah.
all the time and stuff like that. And so he started being in that with us. And so my parents were already not liking him just because of um what his past was.
Right.
And so this is where, you know, if you back up on my side, the relationship with my mom was getting very strained.
Hmm.
And, and I don't, I look back now as, because I'm about the age she was then.
Hmm.
And, I look at now, okay, what was my mom going through at the
Right.
time? You know, menopause, perimenopause, there's a lot of things
Yeah.
that women are going through at this age and stuff. And, you know, So I try to, I have a lot more grace for it now because I can look back
Right.
and say, okay, there's probably some things going on that my mom wasn't necessarily like divulging to me, that she was
Mm-hmm.
dealing with. But we were butting heads a lot. And, when the conversation arose about him, not relationship wise, it was just about him being involved in things that our group was doing. I was very upset by the way that my mom was talking because it went against everything that I was raised to be,
Yeah.
and I was just like, this is everything we're taught to be, is to forgive the sinner, to welcome them in, to,
Mm-hmm.
all these things. And like, I don't understand, like, this doesn't make any sense, whatever. And still, I mean, I wasn't looking at him like any kind of
Mm-hmm.
relationship at all. I just saw him as a brother in Christ and somebody that was, trying to rebuild their life. And this is
Yeah.
somebody that we need to, come together around and support and encourage. And that's, you know, the way I looked at it. And over time, um, he would talk to me at church. And
Mm-hmm.
so I guess you could call that flirting, but I wouldn't really call that what it was. But just conversations. He would just have little
Yeah.
conversations with me. And then I was told by someone that he liked me, and so then I was just like, then now you've gotten to know this person a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very nice. I mean, we just, it went from there. And you know, so
What? So he came into y'all's church. He didn't grow up in your church. Is he from the same area
no,
that
he
you're
he
from?
grew up he grew up in that church. So
Oh, okay.
so
So y'all watched his life.
not me. No, I didn't grow up in that church. So
Mm.
he grew up in that church, as far as I knew, from a young child on up.
Mm-hmm.
But in his late teens, early 20s, I mean, he strayed away from God and church and all of that. And so he didn't come to church there, but his parents went to church there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started going to church there when we moved into the town, probably when I was about 15.
Okay.
So I'd been going to church there for several years, but I'd never seen him there, never met him,
Yeah.
never, nothing. I didn't know anything about him
Okay.
until he got into some trouble. And of course, he got put on the prayer list.
Yeah.
Everybody prayed for, their son and everything. And so I did what everybody else in church was doing. I prayed for him and hoped
Yeah.
that, I knew our pastor was going to see him like weekly.
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing what church people do, try to bring people back to Christ
Yeah.
and back to God.
Okay. So y'all meet. Then a couple of months into him coming back, um, he expresses to someone, "Hey, I kind of like her."
Hmm.
And they let you know, and now all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, okay, he's kind of attractive, he's kind of
Yeah.
cute, I like his personality in this conversation. How long after y'all start talking and having these random conversations at church, how long before y'all actually are like, well, we're gonna date?
Um, well, of course, my parents were never letting any of that happen. So
Hmm.
there was just things with my parents were just very bumpy, and it wasn't because of him. I mean, it might have
Hmm.
made things worse, but there was already problems before that. And we're talking about like um we're getting close to like me graduating high school.
Yeah.
And so um things were just not going well. And
Hmm.
so, on my side, I tried to reach out to my dad. I tried to have a conversation with him that went in a very bad
Hmm.
way. And so I finally just was like, I'm moving out. And
Mm.
it had nothing to do with him. We could have broke up 2 weeks later. I still wouldn't have gone back home. That the two had nothing to do with each other.
Got you.
Um, you know, and um, so I graduated on like a Friday and moved out on Monday. I didn't stay at home at all. And so I moved in with the couple actually that were our youth leader people.
Okay.
And so I moved in with them. And so then, of course, you know, I was able to see him more, obviously,
Hmm.
because of, I was out on my own basically. So,
Yeah.
um,
Did the couple that you moved in, did they ever offer or did you ever ask for any advice in regards to the relationship? Because you hadn't been in many relationships, if any, up until this point. Was
Yeah,
there any
they were
conversation about it?
supportive. They were supportive of it. They were spending a
Mm.
lot of time with him. The guy
Mm-hmm.
and him, the two guys were going hunting together and stuff like this. And so I think again, you know, you're not seeing anybody else raising a hand and saying, "Hey, this isn't, you know,
Yeah.
this isn't a good person," and
Mm-hmm.
as far as like where I was in my relationship with God at the time, I when we started our this is telling way too much information, but when we started our senior year at high school, and I was going to a Christian school, and the one of our teachers told us at the very beginning of the year, she's like, "Hey, some of you are going to graduate and you're going to go into the military. Some of y'all are going to go to college. Some of y'all will go to work. Some of y'all are going to get married, and you need to start now praying about where you're going to work, if you're going to go in the military, who you're going to,
Mm-hmm.
marry, all these different things." And so she really was focusing on the whole, like, at some point you're going to marry somebody. And she was kind of focusing down on that. And she was talking about like how her and her husband met, and and so she was encouraging us to make the list. People talk about
Mm-hmm.
making a list. And so I took this to heart, because I was just like, um, I was praying to God. I was just like, I don't want to be in like 900 different relationships to try to find somebody. I really just want you to bring whoever to me, and I made the list, and I wish I
Mm-hmm.
had that list today, because it's unreal. This man walked off of my paper. I mean, he really did. And so it was very hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard today. And this is something that I struggle with today in my relationship with the Lord, because I know what I was praying for,
Mm-hmm.
and I know what you put in my path, and they were the same. So I don't understand, I have a hard time with that. I mean, down to physical eye color,
Mm-hmm.
hair, facial hair, everything
Mm-hmm.
was exactly what I spelled out on that paper. And I literally had this piece of paper, and I folded
Mm-hmm.
it over every night, and I stuck it in between my mattress after I prayed over it. And you know, but ultimately I was asking for, God's will as well. I was asking
Mm-hmm.
that, hey, if there's anything on this paper that I don't need, don't give it to me.
Yeah.
And the whole time that we were dating, if you want to call it, I was praying the same thing. If this isn't the
Yeah.
person for me, because I knew what I was walking into. I knew that I was dealing with someone who had a past. I knew
Yeah.
that it, I didn't want to make a mistake. I wasn't trying to be married two or three times. I wanted to only be
Yeah.
married once. I wanted to do, I recognized and I realized that God's way is the best way. I
Yeah.
100% believe that. I still believe it today.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you know, you just pray and try to do your best. But I just, that's something that's very hard to reconcile, is that I know what I prayed for, and
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't trying to go against God. I wasn't trying to be rebellious against
Mm-hmm.
anybody, my parents, God, anybody. I was really trying to do what I felt like God was telling me to do. But
Here's what I have to say about that. Um, the devil hears prayers too.
yeah, yeah.
And the devil can easily send you everything that you want
Hmm.
and you not realize that it's a distraction from the
Yeah,
mission
yeah,
until, and then like you're so young, so your relationship with God, you're telling, it's almost like you're telling how I grew up, Christian church. I mean,
yeah.
Christian school, private school, small school,
Hmm.
didn't date anybody
Yep,
till I got to college. Church
yep,
Monday, Saturday, Sunday. Like you're telling
yep,
me, like, wait
absolutely.
a minute, is this
Yep.
my it's the yin to my yang? So so when I say that, if you were anything like me, it's like God was always around me. I was always
Yep.
around God, but I didn't realize until later in life that I didn't have a deep relationship with God because I was going to church. And I'm not saying this is you. I was going to
Mhm.
church. I was reading the Bible at church. And then, as you get older in your teenage years, you need to read the Bible for yourself. Okay, so I'm reading Psalms or Proverbs because there's 31
Mhm.
chapters in Proverbs and there's
Yeah.
31 months, like all of these things. But it wasn't that I had an actual relationship with
Mhm.
God. And I believe that as we mature in Christ and as we mature physically and mentally,
Mhm.
we're able to pick up on more of the subtle signs that are in the distractions that the enemy sends.
Yeah.
And so like you sitting here writing this down. He like, oh yeah, I'm about to send her everything she thinks she
Yeah.
wants.
Yeah.
And it could be that God wanted that for you too,
Yeah.
but not the character of the person that you ended up with.
Well, I think too, and I don't know how far we'll get into stories and stuff like this. I think too that like I do think it was God. I do think that he had a reason for
Mm,
this. I probably shouldn't have stayed as long as I did.
mm.
Um, but that goes back to I really it goes back to the way you're raised,
Yeah.
I was raised where, you had people coming in to the church, evangelist or singers or whatever, and they're telling stories about how our marriage was at rock bottom and blah blah blah, and we prayed and all this, and God saved our marriage at the last minute, and all these things. And so I 100% believe that. And so I knew that things weren't well early on, but I
Mm-hmm.
kept, first of
Mm-hmm.
all, I don't want to give up on my marriage, and I
Mm-hmm.
want God to move. I want to see God do something.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where your prayers go, is like, okay, God, like, show up, I'm waiting,
Yeah.
and but there came a point where God was like, you're an enabler at this point, and
Mm-hmm.
it's no longer you waiting on me, it's sinful now. And that's what I
Mm.
felt like the Holy Spirit was telling me. And
Okay.
so that's when I got serious about, I'm not doing this anymore. So we
Yeah.
gotta, figure this out one way or
Yeah.
the other. So
I
yeah.
think that God allows certain people to cross our paths for us to learn something from them.
Yeah.
But when we don't have the awareness to see them as a seasonal presence and not an eternal presence,
Hmm.
like you just said, we find ourselves in situations that one we weren't supposed to be in, because God says in his word, right? My plans are to prosper you, not to harm
Yeah.
you, to give you hope in the
Yeah.
future. And the character of that person is not going to prosper you.
Right.
It's not going to give you hope. It's harming you. It's not, the abundance that God wanted for you in a relationship or with
Right.
another human being who God wanted you to have partnership and communion with.
Yeah.
But when we're not able to see the subtle signs that are like, no, this isn't, he's not here for this. She's not here for this. What is she here for? What is he here for?
Hmm.
Because I can easily see when we connected, now that I'm out of it, I'm like, I learned a lot from him.
Oh,
There's a
absolutely.
lot that I'm doing now that is a consequence of me learning from him, like the
Hmm.
mindset that he had. The problem is he let the evilness and the spirit,
Right.
the enemy
Yeah.
take over him, because he could
Hmm.
have been such a great person. He
Yeah.
he could have made such an amazing impact on the world, but
Hmm.
he the ego and the pride is so great. The God
Yeah.
complex is so great that
Yeah.
you're not able to submit to any other leadership, but you want to be the leader, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I
so,
see that. Yeah,
mhm,
and it's interesting the way that you word that, because one of the last conversations that I had with my ex was basically saying that, and I told him, I was like, you can be such a good person when you want to be. Like, I mean, I want to be real clear, that there was never any physical,
mhm.
abuse from him. He never even raised his voice at me.
Wow.
It was other things like the silent treatment and just mind and emotional and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And but in the beginning, and the love bombing, and then at certain times throughout the relationship and stuff, he when he wanted to be husband, when he wanted to stand up and be that, he was excellent at it.
Mhm.
And he's a great speaker. When you go to hear him
Mhm.
preach and speak and all that, he has a gift. And it's really sad to look at, because it's like
Yes.
there's so much there. There's so,
Oh my.
and that's what was so hard for me, in the end, was just like, this is such a waste. Like it
Mhm.
could be, it does not have to be like this, but you
It
can't
doesn't.
you can't make the other person, that everybody's got free will,
Yeah.
and you've got to let them make their choice. And
Yeah.
you know and that's just the sad part of it. It is so hard, because I see so much potential.
Mm.
And I know that, like, you can be loving, you can be kind and all that, but it has to be on your terms. It has to be when you want to. It's not flowing from, you know
Mhm.
God or what he's done
Right.
for you or your relationship with him. It's flowing just from what I need people to how I need people to see me at the moment, or
Control.
I feel like I need to make up for something else I did, or whatever. So
Yeah.
it is really sad. It is really
It is
sad.
so sad. I feel the same way. I'm like you. Now on my side, I can't. I would love to be able to say he never raised his voice at me, but I'm talking about we had it was all financial, spiritual, emotional, physical, mental. All the abuses were over here.
Mm,
Okay, but even with that, I can still see the greatness that God created him for.
yeah.
But he just
Yeah. And
he just can't.
I like to think that God did bring us together, and that, you know, I was put into his life
Mm-hmm.
to see some things differently, to teach him some things, you know, to see, to be loved, to feel loved, to,
Yeah.
whatever. I just hope that I hoped that that's what we were being brought together for.
Mm-hmm.
And, we all have a choice. Again, it goes back to free will. You have a choice
Yeah.
to learn from this person and accept what, I think that's what marriage is all about. I think God brings two people together, and it's about, are you going to humble yourself and learn from this
Mm.
person or not? Because it's two people. It's not one above the
Yes.
other. Neither one of these people are perfect. And if you're really going to work at your marriage and do well and stuff, you're going to confront each other with things that they're not doing well.
Right.
And it comes down to those moments of, are you going to choose your spouse, or are you going to choose yourself? Are you going to choose this
Mm-hmm.
relationship that y'all have together, or you not? There was a time near the end of our relationship, and he was stepping back into some old addictions, and I was
Wow.
like, I was confronting him about this, and I'm just like, you know, God put me in your life, and me in you in my life, that if we are starting to head down a path that is detrimental for ourselves as individuals or for our marriage, that
Mm-hmm.
we would stand up and wave a red flag and say, hey, you're going in the wrong direction. This is not good for us. This is not good for you. I said, and that's all I'm doing. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to be your mother. I'm not trying to tell
Oh.
you what to do. You go do what you want to do, but I'm telling you that I'm standing here, and I'm waving the red flag right now. And that's all I'm trying to do, is get
Mm-hmm.
you to see that you're headed in the wrong direction. And this is not going to end well for you. It's not going to end well for us. But I release you to do whatever you want to do, because you're
Yeah.
not mine to control,
Right.
but it is really sad though. It's really sad to watch somebody just choose the totally wrong things
Yeah.
that just destroy, everything you felt
Yeah.
you've built up. I mean, I was with this guy until I was 40. So,
Wow.
2 decades of my
Wow.
life, I feel like,
Yes.
are spent on somebody who just threw it away. For what? No reason, really.
Yeah.
um, but everybody has free will. So,
The other thing too is it's almost like to piggyback off what you're saying about we're here in this together. It seems like that's what they want to talk about all the time. We're together, but we don't have a say in helping to hold you accountable for your
yeah.
actions. They take it personal, they take
Hmm.
offense. And regardless of how many times I heard, I'm not your enemy, I'm not your enemy. Yeah, I am clearly your enemy because I don't have the space or the
Hmm.
room to be able to say, hey, I don't think that that's right,
Yeah.
because you're the leader of the house and you're
Yeah.
all of these things. I need to
Yeah.
stay in my place, be quiet, and yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. But I
Hmm.
also am not your mom, and da 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 da.
Yeah.
All that stuff that you just said, same thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not trying to be your mom, just trying to be your partner. But with them, it's competition over, like there's no
Yeah.
collaboration.
Yeah.
There is just
Yeah.
control, and I'm not gonna let you. I don't want to feel like you're telling me what to do.
Yeah. And I think one of the things probably that prolonged our relationship, and it never escalated to anything like yelling and fighting and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, probably because I was a submissive wife. It goes back
Mm-hmm.
to the way I was raised and what I was
Yeah.
taught and what my parents modeled for me. My
Yeah.
dad is the head of the house. He makes the decisions, and um, you know, that's kind of how it goes. But um I that's something I would definitely do different the second go around, is
Yeah.
that you lose yourself if you are too submissive. And there's a biblical submission, and I totally
Mm-hmm.
agree with it,
Mm-hmm.
but you're submissive to each
That
other.
part.
Not
That
not
part.
not just the wife to the husband, you're to each other, submissive to each other, in my
And they
opinion.
always leave those
And
verses out.
yeah, that's for sure. But but I just, I wanted a husband to lead.
Yeah.
If I got married
Yes.
again, I want somebody to lead. I want a leader. I
Yes.
want a provider. I do not want to carry all this stuff by myself and
Yes.
and be the head of it and everything like that. And I want to be heard. I want to be
Mm-hmm.
understood. I want my opinions and stuff to be at least be considered when you're making a decision.
Yep.
But I will say that that is something that we got along really well. But I mean, I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of it was just, I just did not want what I had growing up. I
Mm-hmm.
did not, I would do anything for there not to be an argument. And
Wow.
so I just was in this
Wow.
kind of frame of mind that I just didn't care. And I really didn't. Whatever you want, I'm good with it. And I was good with it because it's going to keep peace, and we're all going to be happy. And that's what I want. And so it wasn't a fear of an
Mm-hmm.
argument. It was just, I don't care, just because I just want us to be happy, and that's all that I care about.
Yeah.
I don't care about where we eat dinner tonight. I don't care about what this looks like or what that looks like or whatever. I just want us to be happy and not fight.
Yeah.
And so we really did not have, there was a lot of silence, just a lot
Mm-hmm.
of silence. There was no talking things out.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can say abuse, I would say that's one of the forms, is like, you know, I just never felt like, I felt like the times I did come to him to try to talk something out or work something out, it was met with just, you know,
Shutting it down.
anger, shutting it down, yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I just I just wanted the peace. I wanted peace in my house. And that's what I wanted. So I sacrificed myself a lot, but that was my decision. If I can say
Yeah.
that I did anything wrong, it's that, because I mean, there were times that he could tell something wasn't right. This would be early in our marriage. He could tell that something wasn't right, that I wasn't happy about something or whatever. And, he would try to get me to tell him what was wrong. And I just, nothing. And, I should have opened up.
Yeah.
I should have, said how I felt or what was bothering me, or, whatever. And uh that's something that I did wrong, is, I didn't hold on to me. I really lost myself in all of it. And I
Yeah.
thought I was doing the right thing by just
Yep.
being cooperative and going along with the flow. And I thought this is how you keep a happy home and keep everything peaceful and all that. And I didn't
Mm-mm.
realize that over time, you completely lose yourself,
Lose
and you
yourself.
don't even know what you like anymore, because you haven't had an opinion in forever.
Yes.
And that is definitely not his fault. That was me trying to create what I wanted in this. I wanted a certain just peacefulness in this
Yeah.
home. And that was my way of making that happen.
I
And
see.
I can't say that it wasn't done out of fear, wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
anything like that, but that's
Mm.
something I would definitely wish I could do different.
So you meet, you're 17, he's 23, he has a kid already. Y'all start talking, you move out before you turn 18 and move in with your youth leaders.
Yeah.
You graduate high school. When do y'all get serious, as far as how long are y'all dating before he's talking to you and you're talking to him about seeing a future together
Yeah.
and then
So,
starting to make plans?
yeah. So let me add more detail to this. So when I meet him, he's actually out on bond. So he has been in some major trouble. And
Wow.
yeah, so this is the
Oh, pause,
embarrassing.
pause, 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 pause.
uh,
For anyone who is listening, especially all you Christians out there,
yeah,
does everybody deserve a second chance? Absolutely.
yeah,
Are you the one that has to give it to them? Absolutely not.
yeah,
And I say that because we are conditioned to look beyond the faults of people
Yeah.
and try to see their character, even though their actions have already shown us who they are. Everybody does deserve a second chance. I'm just gonna say, I'm not telling y'all what to do, but if you coming across somebody who's out on bond, that's a red
Yeah.
flag. Like,
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree with you 1,000%, 1,000%. And that's like when I tell this now as a 47-year-old, I'm like, gosh, I was so stupid. But, this is somebody who our pastor had been going to see every single week while he was in jail. He had made the profession of faith, and I 100% believe
mm-hmm,
that he was sincere,
mm-hmm,
because who he was then and who he is today is two different people.
mm-hmm,
And um, I do think that he was on the right path.
mm-hmm,
And had he stayed humbled to God like he
mm-hmm,
was in the beginning,
mm-hmm,
this
mm-hmm,
would be a different story right now.
mm-hmm.
But at a point along the way, when problems and things started to come his way, um, we didn't turn to God. We didn't turn to people in the church. We turned back to old habits
Mm-hmm.
and old ways. And I think when he made that kind of turn to that, that's when we brought back these
Yeah,
narcissistic ways and tendencies and attitudes and things like that. But
yeah.
I 100% believed that and I still believe today that he was 100% sincere, and
Mm-hmm.
that I mean, he was in the Word, he was reading the Word, he was praying, he was, we were discussing the Bible. I mean, it wasn't like it was just somebody who showed up for church and never showed any other fruit, you know. He was very uh interested or adamant. He wanted to keep youth from making the decisions he made. And so he was going into speaking into other churches, to youth groups. He was speaking to people. I mean, came into our school and
Mm-hmm.
and spoke, um, and just shared his testimony. And
Yeah.
he was very um, clear about, like, he was talking about specifics about, like, you think you do it for fun, you do it to fit in, or you do it for whatever. He's like, but there is a line of addiction, and you
Mm-hmm.
cross over it and you don't even realize you've crossed over it. And now what you were doing for fun, you're doing it because you have to.
Yeah.
And these are, and he's talking to
Mm-hmm.
kids like I just described about myself, who've never been in these environments, who've never been around these things, who's never seen, or maybe they have,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think it was really good because he was making people aware of, you know you sneak off to go to a party your parents don't even know you're at, maybe, and you get
Yeah.
exposed to some of these things, and you start, you want to hang out with these people now, and you got to join in these activities that they're doing. And and so um I think that he was on the right track. I think he was, like I said, there was fruit there. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
just somebody who went to church on Sunday morning and then didn't go to church I mean, he was in church every time the doors were open, any type of stuff that the youth were doing or anything like that. Like, I say youth,
Yeah.
but we were older.
Yeah.
But he was involved. He was doing all the things. Now, maybe he was putting on a show. I don't know, but I I think it would have worn off at some point. But so anyway, that is part of the thing. So we were
Mm-hmm.
dating, if you want to call it, for um it was probably close to a year
Mm-hmm.
before his court trial and all that. And then he got sentenced to 9 to 11 years. Yeah. So, and I waited like an idiot. But yeah.
Kristi.
Yes. Yeah.
Do-
I 100% believed this was what God wanted for me. This is what I prayed for on my paper. This man walked off this paper. He was everything that I had prayed for, everything.
He's
So,
23
yeah.
with a kid. Now he's 24 and you're 18.
Um, I might have turned 18 before he turned 24, but that's just,
Right. So y'all
yeah,
are 24 and
ridiculous.
18. You've been talking, dating for a year now.
Close
He
to it.
gets
Close to a year.
close to a year, so not even
Yeah.
a year.
Yeah. And at this point, I had met his family. Of course, I was, we're having Sunday dinner together every
Mm-hmm.
Sunday. Where, all the things. And his parents are good people. They loved me. I think I could call them today and say, I
Mm-hmm.
need help or I need this, and I think they would be there.
Mm-hmm.
I keep distance because I believe divorce is divorce, and you know, he's remarried, and I don't have any reason to be up at your house, you know.
Right.
So there's distance there, but I mean, like I care, about his parents. I think they were very nice people. They definitely were good to me. And so you're seeing what he comes from too. It's not just, you're not just picking this one guy and not knowing anything about him. You know, I'm getting close to his daughter. All the things. We're spending time together. Um, but yeah. So yeah, I waited, and every weekend I would go to whatever prison he was at, and I would get the 2 hours and spend the 2 hours with him. I'd go with his parents. I lived with his parents pretty much the whole time that he was away. Um,
How long did he actually have to be in prison before he got out on parole?
it was like 9 years.
So he did
Mm, yeah.
you went to see him
Hmm. Almost every weekend. I mean,
for
there might have been
nine
one or two,
years.
but yeah, yeah. But I mean, during this time, um, he's getting his degree online and stuff with, I don't know what the title of the degree is, but basically biblical pastor,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, because he wanted to be youth pastor. That's what he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to keep kids from doing what he had done. And that was what he was doing. So he's again, he's in the word, prayer. We're writing letters back and forth. We are talking about
Mm-hmm.
scripture. We're talking about, you know, I mean, after a year of him being in there, that's when he asked me to marry him. So I said yes, of course. But, you know, I just, I did it. I don't know. I really 100% believed that was God, who God wanted me, who God had for me. And
And that's the tough part because that's what you truly believe. Like you
a
really
hundred
believe
percent.
that. You
Yeah.
are all in. As you're talking, I'm smiling because baby, when they're in prison and they don't have access to the things that give them the freedom to be who they are,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
all in the word. Because you're like, we're reading the Bible, we're discussing same thing over here. Matter of
Well,
fact,
go ahead.
huh?
He was actually like so he got moved several times because that's
Hmm.
just, what happens. But several of the places he was at, he
Hmm.
actually got jobs with the chaplain.
Hmm.
And
Oh.
one of the last places he was there for several years. And so this is getting into the point where he's in like the minimum custody, and we can come and take him to, for the weekend or whatever.
Hmm.
And we're going to church where the chaplain pastors. The chaplain is telling me, I had a conversation completely separate that he didn't know about, that with the chaplain about him.
Hmm.
Again, this whole time I'm praying, God, if this is not the person for me, like, just show me. Just show me. I want to be obedient. I'm not like, I can't walk away from this person. Like, I'm telling God, like, I 100% think that this is who
Hmm.
you're telling me to be with. And if I'm reading this wrong, I just need you to tell me. And
Yeah.
never did I feel like that was, or think, or,
Yeah.
that was,
That's
you
amazing.
know,
That's amazing. And these are two totally different people. Um, but Harper over here was very similar. Went to jail. I didn't meet him when he was out on parole. I met him afterwards. Went
mhm.
to jail, in there, all the things, top, if they could get an award for best
Yeah.
participant or best person, oh, he would have got it. He would have got it.
Yeah.
And writing letter, I didn't write letters to him, but I found letters that him and whoever he was dating at the time when he was in jail were writing letters. So I'm like, for you though, you didn't feel like it was wrong. Like you feel like you were on the right path.
Mhm.
And that's what's different for me because I could sense I was like something, things aren't right, but I kept allowing my insecurities to keep allowing the relationship to develop and grow when it should never have gotten anywhere. Like there were enough signs for me to be like, nah, we shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do this.
I didn't
But
feel like something wasn't right until
yeah,
about 3 or 4 months into marriage.
wow.
So it was, or maybe even further than that. It was during the first year of marriage. I was just like, something, I couldn't put my finger on it either. It wasn't anything anybody had done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I couldn't just say it was this thing. It was
Uh-huh.
just underlying, that I was getting the silent treatment for no reason. And, again, I've never lived with,
Right.
a guy before. Is this what guys are
Yeah.
doing? Like, is this really, you know, I mean, and again, I don't have parents who
Mm-hmm.
resolved conflict in front of me in a healthy way.
Correct.
So, you know, you're just left with a lot to try to
Mm-hmm.
just plug in what you think or know or feel or whatever. And, I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And of course, I blamed myself that,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't being good enough. I wasn't being a good enough wife. I wasn't doing this right, or I needed to work on this over here. And
Yeah.
that I would always turn it internal, that there was something wrong with me. And so for a long time, that's where my head was at. And then probably somewhere in year 2 or 3, I guess, I got to a point where I was like, you know what? This isn't me. I'm not
Mm.
I'm not the only problem here. I'm not going to say I'm not the problem, that I'm
But
not
I'm
doing
not the
anything.
only
But
problem.
like I'm not the only problem. Like I'm bending over backwards. I know where my heart is. I know that my
Mm-hmm.
heart wants a healthy, happy
Mm-hmm.
relationship and marriage, and yet I'm getting the silent treatment and I'm not even being told why.
Yeah.
Nothing's happened. I'm just
Yeah.
getting silent treatment out of nowhere that could last for days,
Yeah.
and it's like I've never been treated like that before. I've never had somebody just literally ignore me. I mean, I could be
Yeah.
standing there asking a question and just
You don't
nothing, not
exist.
even speak,
Right.
not acknowledge you and go like that for days,
Yeah.
you know. And that's the silent treatment thing is what really, I guess, started. If I had to put my finger on something, that's really where I was just like, what is this? Like this, I
Yeah.
don't, you know,
Yeah.
don't know what know
To
about
do I
this.
don't know what to do with this. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So we went the 9 years, and then towards the end of the 9 years, I found out that I had ovarian cancer
Wow.
when I was 26 years old. And so I went through all of that, and that was very hard because all I
Yeah.
ever wanted was to be a wife and have children. And that was extremely hard. And it was hard, like not having him there.
Yeah.
And so I, um, after it was over, I was just terrified that it was going to come back. And
Mm-hmm.
now I look back and I'm like, that was so, like, I don't know why I was so terrified of that. Cause like, that's, I mean, I'm not gonna say it can't happen, but when I hear stories now about cancer, like that's usually not how it works.
Yeah.
Um, but I was just terrified that it was going to come back, and so um, I wanted us to go ahead and get married. That was my choice, my
Mm.
decision, everything. And he was only a couple months, 5 or 6 months maybe away from being home.
Yeah.
Um, and so we did like a little just a little very simple little ceremony
Mm-hmm.
thing at that chaplain's church. He performed the ceremony and everything. It was nice and everything, but I really didn't want it to be played up because I wanted a real, the whole shebang later, which we never did. But that was partly my decision too. Um, so it just made me feel better that
Yeah.
and there was if we had been married, there were some ways that I probably could have had him at the hospital with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just wanted that reassurance that if something happened, that
Yeah.
I would do that differently and I would have him there.
Yeah.
Um, and so we got married while he was still there, and um, yeah, he came home later, and we start life together.
I want to say this, and I know that everybody's different. I know that people really can change, but in that situation, it's hard for you to see who he's hiding from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because for you to get married and then 3 months after y'all are married, now you're starting to finally feel that something's not right. It's because you weren't with him for those 9 years.
Hmm.
Y'all were together for 9 years.
Yeah.
But I can, when we're talking about a specific type of person here, a
Yeah.
narcissist,
Yeah.
like they are phenomenal
Hmm.
at
Yeah.
putting that mask on. And he only had to do it for 2 hours a week.
Hmm.
And granted, he still kept it on while he was there. Otherwise, the chaplain wouldn't have had spoken so highly
Right.
of him. But that's what they do.
Yeah.
And you weren't given the opportunity to be around him when the mask was starting to slide down,
Hmm.
if it ever
Well, I mean,
got there.
honestly, again, I might be wrong. Maybe I'm still
Mhm.
being thinking wrong, but I honestly believe that in these early years, I do believe he was sincere about his relationship with the Lord. I do believe he was in the Word. I don't think
Mhm.
it was I don't think it was a put on.
Yeah.
I really don't. I think we were fine until some problems came, um, that you didn't turn to God and to church and to people, that you went back to some old ways.
Mhm.
And then that started splintering off us, and I mean, the silent treatment, I don't like it. It's not great. Um, but could we have worked through that? Could we have, at the on the early in the early stages, if I
Mhm.
had held my ground and been like, look, we're not doing this, this is not, and again, that's where I would do stuff different. I
Mhm.
often wonder, like, if I had been more vocal in the beginning about what I will and will not tolerate,
Yeah.
whether it causes an argument or not,
Yeah.
if I had been more outspoken and stuff like that, would things have, I still think things would have ended like they did, but could we have, you know, I don't
Mhm.
know.
In my experience with someone who, because I could tell you the same thing about Harpo over here. I truly believed he was in the Word. I truly believe he has a gift of being able to hear God's voice. I truly believe that he was growing into a better person. But I also believe, and I'm not projecting this on you, but I
Mhm.
do just want to share the parallel
Yeah.
universe of your life and mine. I experienced this when he wasn't in jail as long as
Mhm.
the person over there. While he was in jail, he had the opportunity to only focus on God,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Once he got out, he was still fresh in, I'm going to focus on God, because he didn't have any money. He
Hmm.
didn't have anything.
Yeah.
He didn't have his other two kids. He was trying to rebuild, and he was in a vulnerable state to
Yeah.
really, truly put his weight
Yeah.
on God. I'm not saying that they can't really be in that state. I believe that if this guy over here was in jail for 9 years, it would have been the same way.
Mhm.
You would have believed through and through that
Yeah.
he was that transformed dude. When in reality, he was just that, you paint over something and you put enough coats on it, you can't see through the paint anymore.
Yeah.
In reality, that's what that was. Like, I
Yeah.
can depend and lean on God when I don't have anything else to lean on. But what happens when I get out here and I can go back to my old ways?
Hmm.
And the what you dealt with, those old ways were different addictions. What I dealt with, those over here, these old ways were different addictions and physical abuse.
Hmm.
And so it's sad because you just they're so they're so convincing. And I'm curious, like, what if he didn't end up in jail for 9 years? What if he got
Oh, he
off
would
on
have.
parole? and y'all were able to just start dating, like, and
Oh,
then get married, and like, would you have seen something prior to you seeing all the good
uh,
and all the growth in 9 years? Would he have had, because he would have had access to step away from God again and start turning like he did
yeah,
9 years later? Would he, just curious,
yeah.
just thought,
I
would he have done
wonder.
that?
Yeah, I wonder about a lot of different things. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't want to sound like I'm like still like trying to make excuses for
Mm-hmm.
behavior or anything like that, because, I do believe God can change people. I do believe that.
Absolutely.
And I believe, it comes down to a choice. And it's,
Of
every
course.
day we wake up, we have to decide, are we living for God or are we living for ourselves? Every
Correct.
moment of the day, every time a decision or a problem or a worry or a fear or whatever comes our way, am I leaning on God? Am I leaning on myself? And um, I think that, when you've had addictions and things like that, and you have narcissistic tendencies, or you are a narcissist, or whatever you want to say there, and then you get yourself in trouble, you go to jail, whatever, at somewhere along the way, you're never, I don't think, like, he was ever given tools of how to deal with a problem with outside of the addictions. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do I turn to? Like, what do I
Right.
do? And just because you know, just because you are a Christian doesn't necessarily mean that you always know who to go to or where to turn, or,
Right.
whatever. And I think that, that's what I really think it came down to for him. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
I think it came down to, you know, some things started coming his way through
Mm-hmm.
work and things like that, that were heavy,
Yeah.
hard problems. He had some people turning on him,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And I think that at those moments, that was the time where you had the choice, basically, of, turning to God and your wife or another
Yeah.
pastor or whatever, or you go back, or you try to act like you've got it all together, and you behind the scenes start dabbling in these addictions again. And
Yeah.
that's the choice that he made. And I think that is the crossroads, is that
Yeah.
we came to that. I mean, we were okay. you
Mm-hmm.
know were there things he was doing that I didn't like, as far as the silent treatment and stuff? Yes, there was absolute things that shouldn't have happened, that I didn't like, absolutely. But I also was being too quiet about these things.
Mm-hmm.
I was, again, in that I was losing myself by just being quiet. I just want everybody to be happy, and
Yeah.
I'm excusing behavior because I'm not confronting it. So,
Correct.
again, everything is not all my fault. But again,
Mm-hmm.
I can look back at this relationship and see where, there's some things I definitely will do different the next time around, if there is a next time. Um, and but I do think that there was a moment. It was towards the end of our marriage, and we had a conversation. We were on our back porch, and I will never forget this conversation as long as I live. And I'm just standing there, just asking him, like, what is it? Like, why are you just throwing all this away? Like, I basically told him that, like, you've got a choice. It's me or
Mm-hmm.
alcohol. Which one is it? And he's showing me that he's not choosing me. And I'm just like, I just don't understand. Like, what is the reason? And I'm just, I'm crying, and I'm, just, I wanted that to work. I wanted there to be a breakthrough, and I'm still waiting on God to show up and fix
Yeah.
everything. And probably, I don't know, a year or two after that or whatever, I'm just, in my time with God, and I'm crying about this and praying and all that kind of stuff. And he just spoke to my heart, and he said, that night on that back porch, you know, you were pleading on the outside, but I was pleading on the inside. And he didn't reject you, he rejected me.
Mm.
And, you know, I often think that, like, because there was a moment there that everything just got quiet. And I really felt like God was tugging at his heartstrings and stuff. And he just would not, I think pride and everything, he just would not let go and admit
Yeah.
that, like, yes, I'm doing this, it's wrong, I need help, because I'm sitting here telling him, I'm like, look, if you're, if you started drinking so much that you're back, because I mean, this is relapse, this is what I told him. I'm like, you're in relapse. We both know it. You might want to deny it, but we know it. I will go to every AA meeting you need to go to. I married you knowing that relapse was probably in our future. I've read the AA books, I read the NA books before I ever married this man. I tried to do everything I could to educate myself. Again, I wasn't trying to make stupid decisions. I was trying to be
Hmm.
smart about it. And I'm reading in there and it's saying like it's inevitable, like it's going to happen, and all that kind of stuff. And this is what you do. You make sure you're going to your um your AA meetings, and you have accountability, and all these things. And so in my mind, all the time I just thought, well, if we ever got to that point, then it's just easy. We do what needs to be done. We go to AA
Yeah.
meetings, and you're going to have me for support, like all that. And when I did not like factor in is the pride.
Hmm.
I've never thought in a million years that I would be able to look at this man and be like, look, don't you remember what happened over here? Don't you remember how much time you spent in jail? All that was based off of these addictions. You got into that kind of trouble because of these addictions. And why are we heading back down that road? We
Right.
know where this ends. We know the end of this story. It does
Right.
not end well. And we need to reverse course. We need to make a change. And I never in my a million years thought this man would be looking at me like, I don't have a problem. I've got this under control. I know what I'm doing. I'm not the problem. You are. And, all those things. Like, I'm just sitting here like, what in the world? Like,
Yeah.
and it's just, but again, it's just sad. It's sad to watch
It
somebody
is.
just make those choices. But, I will never forget, like, when God just said, you're pleading on the inside, on the outside, and I was pleading on the inside. And he made his choice. I can't force him. I can't make him
Yeah.
do the right thing. He has free will, and this is the choice he's made. And
Did did you ever bring up, because going back to what you were talking about with the ability to change and the inability to change a person, they have to be willing to change themselves. And then just because you're a Christian and just because you're in the church doesn't mean you know where to go to get help. Like, you don't know. Did the conversation of therapy ever come up? Not necessarily marital counseling, but therapy for him as
mm,
he's now being faced. He's no longer in the, this is about to sound so crazy, but he's no longer in the comfort of the prison
mhm,
because his spirit, it, based off of what I've heard from the person I was dealing with, is my interpretation was his spirit was able to be protected in there. It
mhm,
wasn't yeah, there are temptations in there still, but I did like it, I don't feel like it was set to be, like it wasn't fireproof. Like it wasn't set to the
yeah.
fire in there because you had so much time to really dive in and do these things. So now that we're outside though, did that conversation of, well, have you ever thought about getting a therapist to help you navigate through? Did that conversation ever come up?
Not like that. So when we were dating, if you want to call it, there was a conversation I had with him, and I said, look, I said, you know, I want you to promise me one thing. I was like, if 10 years into our marriage or 15 years into our marriage, I come to you one day out of nowhere and I'm like, we need to go to marriage counseling. I said, I don't care if you think there's nothing wrong with our marriage. I don't care what you feel or think about our marriage, that you're going to be willing to go to it because I asked. I
Mm-hmm.
said, because if we get to a point where I think we need it, I just want you to be willing to go. Even if you don't think there's a problem, I just want you to
Mm-hmm.
promise me that you will be willing to go. And he promised me. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I am sincere in what I'm doing and saying, and so I believe you are too.
Yeah.
But I did not say anything about, I never even thought about him going to counseling or anything. And I look back now and I'm like, man, that was really dumb of me to not like insist on,
Mm-hmm.
don't you need to be going to AA still? Don't you need to be going to, you know, don't you need to still be having a sponsor? And really, now that I'm thinking about it, he kind of did have one. There was a guy that, an older man, such a sweet, nice man. He was very involved in the prison, loved Jesus, and he, I would basically call him Michael's sponsor. I really would. Probably even years after he got out, he was the man he really liked Michael a lot because he felt like Michael was a success story and that he had a hand in that and everything. And he did. And he would he came a couple times to different churches that we were at. He would come and just pop up out of nowhere on his motorcycle and just come to spend the day with us, and we wouldn't even know he
Mhm.
was coming and stuff. Really sweet man. So kind of now when I look back on it, that maybe that's why my guard was down in that aspect is there was somebody that he was talking to a little bit, but the man got older, passed away. They stopped talking.
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, I know he passed away, but I'm not sure how long they talked and stuff after, he got out and everything. But, I mean, I feel like they had conversations, but that's something I should have insisted on more. But there did come a time, getting towards the end of our marriage that I came to him one day and I said, I reminded him of that promise. And I said, now's the time. I was like, we are not good. I
Mhm.
said, and you can't tell me that the way that we are right now, because we were at this point, we were just roommates.
Yeah.
I was getting up in the morning, going to work, and coming back home. And when I would come in, he would leave and he would be gone.
Yeah.
And, we were just ships passing in the night. We weren't really in a relationship, like we should. And so I told him, I'm like, you can't tell me that this is the way that you want our marriage to go for the rest of our lives. Like, you really want to be just silent treatment and not enjoying each other, like married people and,
Yeah.
and everything. And he just looked at me. He said, I'm not the problem. You are. He's like, you can go to
Mm.
counseling all you want to. You need it. I don't. And I knew then that my marriage was done because if this is your attitude, there's nowhere to go. There's
Nowhere.
you're never going to um work on anything. And so
Yeah.
that was just heartbreaking. Another conversation I'll never forget is just heartbreaking because I knew that, like, okay, so this is your attitude, this is where your mindset is at.
Mhm.
Your actions definitely line up with that. So what am I supposed to do? And
Yeah.
but I mean, we were still together for probably another 4 or 5 years after that conversation.
Wow.
Because again, I'm still praying and asking
Right.
God to move, and do something. And you know, but
Yeah.
that's the only conversations that we really had about therapy.
Okay. And that's not surprising, his response. And I was just curious because I do believe, yes, I believe God, prayer changes things, God can change a
Mhm.
person. I believe all of that. But when we're dealing with these types of people, they're not, it's hard for them to accept responsibility and accountability of their actions. And they're not usually open to therapy, which is where God
Yeah,
said it in the Bible, like you need to have counsel on earth. Yes,
mm,
you have me, but you still need to have counsel. You need to have friends. You need to have, like, if Jesus got 12 disciples, I ain't saying you got to have 12,
yeah,
in the circle, but you're supposed to be, he created us all to be
yeah,
in communion with one another.
yeah,
And what I've noticed a lot, well, let me just speak from my experience. What I noticed a lot from my experience, he didn't have he didn't have friends, he didn't have a
yeah,
community. He thought that
yeah,
it was him and God, and
mm,
I heard God speak to me, Father. Oh, this is what God says, and blah blah blah. But let me bring
yeah,
up therapy for both of us, and it's like you
yeah,
just said, I'm not. But in his case, he did, but he had to choose the counselors. This is a marriage counseling. He did have to choose the counselors. He chose the counselors, and then he wouldn't do what they wanted him, told him that he needed
mm,
to do as the leader. Because to go way back to when you were talking about how you were being a submissive wife, I do believe God wants us to submit to our husbands, but I believe that the problem that we have is that we submit to people who refuse
Right.
to submit to God.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then they go around with the hat that I'm all about God.
Mm,
And I'm all in the church. He was
yeah.
all in the church, trying to get me in church, like all the things for the outside world to say, I approve of you. But that character and that heart
Yeah.
posture was still just black, you know?
Well, I think that for God to change anybody, you have to humble yourself.
Right.
You have to come under his authority. You have to
Correct.
agree with what his correction is and what his way is, because
Hmm.
his way is the best way. And that is hard for just anybody with a sin nature to do.
Yeah.
But then when you pile the narcissistic kind of attitude and traits and view of world, then it's even harder. And
Correct.
so I think that's really what it comes down to is you've got to humble yourself and admit you were wrong and that you're the problem or that you need to change something about yourself.
Yeah.
And I just think that that was just not there. It
Yeah.
wasn't, you know, it just wasn't there.
So the signs that like, so since we were talking about narcissistic abuse, because this is a different conversation. I've had this conversation maybe two other times on this podcast where hardcore physical or any level of physical abuse wasn't an issue. So I think this conversation is equally as important
Mhm,
as those conversations because it's easy to get trapped in the go along to get along phase,
mhm.
and God doesn't want that for us, and you don't deserve to be second or third thought to somebody who says that
Right.
like we're partners,
Yeah.
we're in collaboration. But even in your case, you are still the enemy because anyone who can fix their lips to say, I'm not the problem, you are. We're
Mhm.
not, you don't see me as equal. You
Yeah.
don't see me as your partner. You don't see me as someone
Mhm.
that we can work together for the greater good of anything
Mhm.
because you're saying the only problem here
Yeah.
is not me, not it.
Yeah.
And I want to dive in a little bit as far as your experience is concerned. What, looking back now from the start of, so you got the silent treatment, and that's another big thing. Like, even with you saying he grew up in a two-parent household that was in the church, like anybody can go wayward. Anybody can
Yeah.
start off in the church or not start off in the church and completely go
Right.
the wrong way. We're not even talking about that.
Yeah.
But I'm curious as to the other reason why we're having these conversations is because they're so necessary to show people that healthy conversations need to be
Yeah.
had. You know,
Yeah.
you and me both, not saying that we grew up in abusive households, but the inability to have a healthy conversation with our children, our
Mhm.
parents with us, I'm saying,
Yeah.
with the children is causing
Yeah.
problems too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
So,
that's something that, I almost didn't want to do this because I watched some of the clips of some of the other videos you've done, and some of these women have been through horrible physical abuse. And I'm like, well,
mhm,
who am I to get up here and start talking about
a
what I've
very
been through
person, yep,
when honestly it wasn't bad from a physical
physical,
point, but the scars on the inside of me are horrible. And
yeah,
you know, the church doesn't recognize that like they should. And
right,
I hope that like this conversation and the more conversations like it, that um, I mean, we know that back in the 80s and 90s, and I'm sure still today, women who are being abused go to their pastors and they're being told to stay in it because it's
yep,
you don't get divorced and that's a sin. And and I was raised that way. Divorce was like the biggest sin and all that. And again, that's probably why I stayed in as long as I did,
hmm,
keeping hoping and praying, and everything. But I just thought that I have a story too, and I've been through what I've been through, and
yeah,
hopefully it helps somebody. And I do hope that if anybody watches this, if you're a mom with daughters, that you're teaching them what can happen. Don't just fall back on, even if you and your husband have a healthy relationship and you've modeled a healthy relationship,
Hmm.
or if you've taken your kids to church all their life and you're a single mom, talk to your kids, especially your daughters, about, you know, the ways of men, like the ways of a narcissist and what a
Hmm.
red flag is and all this. I mean, there's tons of information out there now because we have, the internet and TikTok and Instagram and
Yeah.
Facebook and all this. And there's tons of people out there talking about this conversation. So, but we can never just, I think it's just crucial for parents to have conversations with their kids about, and now we're seeing narcissism rise, with girls,
Hmm.
and women. And so, men, boys, they need to have these same conversations with your
Yeah.
sons. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm very thankful, and I look back on it and I think, even though my prayer wasn't answered for my marriage to last, God definitely protected me in all
Oh,
the
yeah.
ways. Um, you know, Physical abuse is something that he has done in the past, under the
Really?
under the influence of alcohol and drugs. I will not say sober. I don't know that he ever did anything sober,
Pause, pause, pause,
but he never
pause,
touched me.
pause.
I mean, I'm not telling anything that's not public record. So,
Right, right.
but I'm not trying to, you know, say all his bad stuff out there or whatever. But yeah, I mean, past relationship, and because I mean, you have to think about like when he was, when he got his girlfriend pregnant in high school. This is the time where he is under the influence of drugs and alcohol from probably 15 on until 21, 22.
Hmm.
And we're not talking about lightly or light stuff. We're talking about, you know, messed up.
Yeah.
And so there's, I'm not going to say I don't know how often. I mean, it doesn't sound like it was a lot from what I know, but I mean, he has put his hand on somebody before. Um, but I never feared that he would do that to me or anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, I always told him because his parents absolutely loved me. I think they were just so happy that their son was finally living right and he had somebody that was loving him and supporting him, that was the type of person that they would want their son to marry. And I always told him, I'm like, if you ever put your hands on me, I'm just going to call your dad. Like, I'm not
Hmm.
going to, he'll take care of you. So that was, he I don't just knew that I didn't have anything to worry about when it came to that. Because I definitely would have called his dad, and I definitely think he would have handled that if that had ever happened. So I mean, you know, I didn't really worry about that ever. I mean, I knew he was capable. We're all capable. I mean, I
Right.
could have done the same thing. I could have done it, but um, but I do look back on the whole entire time and the whole situation, and I'm just like, it could have gone in a bad direction. It could have
Yeah.
been bad.
The protection.
And I look back over his life, and I'm just like, I got the best of him. I really did. I got the years that you were what appeared to be that you were as close to God as you've ever been,
Hmm.
and that you were clean, that you were sober, you were happy, for the most part. And I'll say even loving. I mean, he did a lot of wonderful, nice things for me, even married, even, you know, the thing that was with him was you might get the silent treatment for 2 or 3 days, but then you're going to have a day where it's all about you. He loves you to death and all that. That's the cycle that they do and stuff like that. And so,
Yeah.
like, I can't sit here and say that every day was hell or every day was horrible or, anything like that. And he was a good husband. He did all the things, dumped the trash, made sure the car was running. I didn't have to take care of any, he did all the things that a husband should have done, paid the bills. He went to work. You know, so I mean, like sometimes I think that's the hard thing for me to deal with too, is like sometimes your mind will just start to reminisce on, oh, I would, I think about some of the things that he took care of that I have to take care of now. And it's like, oh man, I miss not having to worry about that, you know?
Yeah.
And then you start to think about all the good times, and I can get myself to a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, like what did I do? Did I do something wrong? Did I
Mm-hmm.
make the wrong choice? And you almost have to re-traumatize yourself and
Mm.
remember, all the different things of how this ended and all the times he didn't choose you and all the times that, you know, and I think he was so good for so much of the time that it's like hard to,
Justify
you
why
know,
you left.
I don't have, oh, he punched me, oh, he kicked me, oh, I don't have those types of memories to like, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he was definitely the wrong, you have to remind yourself sometimes of, just how he made you feel, just
Yeah.
how, he didn't choose you and, just different things. And so it's hard sometimes to
Yeah.
the mental part of it and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I say people don't see. And I have a family member that we got into a conversation and, you know, she has appreciation for the situation and all of that and everything. But like, I can tell like there is a difference when
Mm-hmm.
you have been physically abused versus just the emotional, but they
Yeah.
are so much the same. And
Mm-hmm.
I just wish people could understand, you know, I'm not discounting being physically abused. I don't know what that's
Correct.
like. I feel so sorry for it. I don't want it to happen to anybody, but those scars and stuff can go away,
Mm-hmm. Talk to him.
and they don't when they're mental. They
Mm-hmm.
don't when they're psychological. They don't
Mm.
when it's your self-esteem that's completely torn apart. And and I know some of that couples along with, the physical abuse and stuff like that. But um, it's real.
Yeah.
And I don't because people can't see it on the outside. So a lot of times I
Yeah.
think, especially in the church, there is so much sympathy and stuff for the physical abuse, but
Nope.
there
It's
is
not.
zero for the mental and emotional. And there's if you're in a denomination that's very big on, you don't divorce and
Mm-hmm.
for any reason and all that kind of stuff and everything, if you're not toting a bruise, they really don't see a reason for you to divorce.
Let me correct you on that though, because we're talking about the church. The level of sympathy that you think is there for physical abuse is not there, because they still, many churches, let me not make a generalized statement, but many churches and many denominations still believe that even if that person is physically abusive, this is a covenant between you and him or her
Hmm.
and God. And they still, like, they'll sit there and say, well, what did you do wrong? What sins
Hmm.
do you have? What are you trying to do to make it
Yeah,
better?
you're right. Yeah.
Like, there, it's
I haven't
not
experienced
as you
that. I
right.
have experienced the other. I
And
have
that's what.
experienced people who I know are Christians who don't see,
Mm-hmm.
you know, this in the same light as they would if
Correct.
you had been physically abused. I have never been in a situation where I've known anybody. I've heard of people, but me personally, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's been to a pastor and been told to stay in an abusive relationship. All the pastors I know will preach from the pulpit and tell you if you're being abused that you should leave.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, yeah, I will agree though. There's still, I mean, there's
There's a
definitely
lot
still
of them
pressures
out
there.
there that
I
don't.
think the thing that's important, and I'll put this out there just because I hope it helps somebody, but I think the thing that we need to understand is that you are an individual
Mm-hmm.
outside of the church, and you can go to church every Sunday and you can feel part of that community and love and support and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, when a crime is being committed against you, it is not your church's job to handle that. It is
Right.
not your pastor's job to handle sexual abuse, even if it's coming from a pastor. You need to be going straight to the police. It's like
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
understand when I hear stories about women that are like, oh, the pastor told me to stay. Why? A crime is being done to you. This is not oh, we're having a disagreement over who should have the say of the car we drive. You're talking about abuse,
Hmm.
and so it's not something to go counsel away in a, you know, you need to get out for your life because this can go wrong so easily. And a lot
Yeah.
of times I think people just rely on their pastor and they never, and that's all they do. And then they're being told
To
bad,
stay.
bad theology and bad
Yeah.
advice.
And you have
And
to take into consideration too the psychological damage that's already been done in many cases before
yeah,
the physical damage is done. Because a lot of people struggle when they're with that in that physical abusive relationship going to the police because of all the psychological distortion that's taken place
mhm,
and the empathy they have for the good in the person that they thought they saw,
yeah,
or the empathy that, like, several conversations, I didn't want to be the reason, like, he just needs help, he just needs
yeah,
counseling. I'm not trying to put him away, like
yeah,
so many, like, but it's all like you said
yeah.
earlier, it's a psychological warfare that happens to couple with physical abuse.
Mhm.
And
But
one
then when
thing,
you go to the church, sometimes you get
but you
more
want
of
to
the
know what's
abuse there,
funny?
is what I'm saying.
Yeah, what's funny about some,
But
you said, like the pastors that wouldn't tell people to stay in a physical abusive relationship, but the funny, not funny, haha, thing is that there are pastors who are physically abusive themselves,
oh yeah. Hmm.
and they would tell someone to
Hmm.
stay. Like, you just don't,
Yeah.
you honestly a lot of times don't know what you're getting with a pastor,
Right.
because, and at the end of the day, they're still human. And I think we
Yeah.
put them on certain pedestals. But I
Hmm.
also feel like if you're going to be called by God, on one hand, there's some things that you really don't need to be doing and call
Right.
yourself a leader, because it's like
Hmm.
there. I don't see how you're submitted to God and you're still treating your wife this way. I don't
Yeah.
see how you're submitted to God and you're still womanizing the women in your church. I don't see how you're truly submitted to God and you're molesting children.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
One thing I want to not speed past, though, is the comment that you made when you said he was physically abusive to someone else, but it wasn't when he was sober. You, like you said, you were blessed, you were favored, you were protected from that. However, on the other side of it is he has done it.
Hmm.
And we don't know if you would have stayed because he started
Oh, we
turning
would have
back,
got there. We would
you
have got
know?
there.
And I want to
Well,
make sure that anyone who's
yeah, I
listening and
think so.
hears this, don't, if you're in an abusive relationship, because this is also another excuse as to why people say, if you're in a physically abusive relationship and you're like, oh, but it only happens when he's drinking
Hmm.
or XYZ, you still don't need to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you meet somebody and you find out that they've been physically abusive and they're like, well, it was just because I was drunk or
Yeah.
something, I haven't done,
Yeah.
that's your red flag to say
Yeah.
this isn't the relationship. Maybe it's for somebody else, but it's not for you, because
Well,
you don't deserve that.
when I say that, I'm not trying to make an excuse
I
or
know.
downplay it. I want to be clear about um if I say anything about him, I want to be clear. I don't want to misrepresent him or the
Hmm.
situation or anything. But we had conversations about, all of that and stuff. And so I felt like that he was very honest with me about, you know, what transpired that led to that. I don't want to say too much on some of that because it involves other people.
Hmm.
And so not that it's ever justified, but I mean, when you mix alcohol and drugs together and then you put relationship stuff on top of that, and you're asking for problems,
Yeah.
and you're going to get probably more likely to get abusive situations coming from that and stuff like that. and
Yeah.
and I will say, like, a lot of the way that I viewed that back then was that was the old him. When
Mm-hmm.
you're raised in
Same.
church, there's the old man and there's the
Same.
new man, and you've put off the old man and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm seeing nothing that reflects the what I've heard about this
Yeah.
past person. I'm seeing no attitudes, um, no nothing. I mean, I just saw a person that was really trying to do the
Yeah.
right thing and make the right choices. And, I can look back and I can see a couple of things that I'm just like, you know, that probably wasn't, that great of a quality. I should
Yeah.
have seen that. But I mean, again, it's nothing to ruin a marriage. It's a
Right.
mild thing, Um, but yeah, I mean, most of our marriage, I was like, something is not right, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. And I, again, had no idea about what narcissism was. I didn't, you know, I just didn't know what the problem was. There came a day, and I'm fast forwarding through a lot of the story, but there came a day one time where he told me, we're just riding in the car, and he was like, you know what? There's something wrong with me. And I was just like, what? And he was like, I don't love people like other people love people.
Mm-hmm.
And something just went off in my head. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like
That's
he
interesting.
he realizes he's thought enough and been introspective enough to realize that there is a difference because I had noticed it, and even he, I think maybe not has said it out loud, but kind of just in conversation had kind of put two and two together. But like, I have a best friend that um, I've been friends with since high school, and ride or die. And he doesn't have anybody like that. And then there's other friends that, I made along the way or whatever. And, I would do nice things for these people, or I would sacrifice something that I wanted to do maybe, or my time or whatever to help this person or do for that person or whatever. Not that he didn't ever do that, but they're just he couldn't understand like my
Mm-hmm.
dedication sometimes to people or
Mm-hmm.
the closeness or why would I do that, and that seems strange to me. And then you know there were times where people would pay him a compliment or pay me a compliment or something, maybe at church or something. And then on the way home in the car, I would say, well, so and so said this today, a nice thing that they might have said about him to me or whatever. And he's like, oh, they don't mean it. And I'm like, what do you
Mm-hmm.
mean? And he was like, nah, he's like, people just say nice things to say nice things. They don't ever really mean it. And I'm just like, in my mind, I'm thinking, man, that's so sad that you think that nobody that gives you a compliment ever means it. That it's just to say something, not just to So like all these little pieces are coming together, and I'm just like, man, like he really sees things so much differently. These
Yeah.
little things are so differently, And there was a time where there was a guy in one of the churches that was really trying to become friends with him, and he really was kind of keeping that person at bay or whatever. And that
Mm-hmm.
was a conversation we had one time. It's just like, like this person's trying to be your friend, like they're trying to, whatever. And he just was not. I'm like, you have to show yourself friendly. Like that's what the Bible says. You can't just expect that everybody's gonna bow down to you. You have to
Mm-hmm.
give back, and it's a give and take, and and all kind of stuff and everything. And so over time, I was seeing some things that I was just like, okay, is this not normal? Is this like,
Mm-hmm.
I again, just little pieces that I was put together, but I had nothing to name it or call it
Yeah.
or anything,
Mm-hmm.
um but when he had that conversation, that's what really set everything in motion. When he said, I don't love people the way that other people love people. And I was just like, he's right. And I was like, okay, what is this? Maybe
Yeah.
this is our problem, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe this is what I'm feeling that I can't quite put my finger on, and it lines up with the other examples I just gave.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so let me, I didn't say anything to him. I just let him talk and I didn't say anything. And so I'm like, okay, this has to be a personality disorder. That's what this is,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just, pulling, just researching on my own, just trying to figure anything out. And so
Yeah.
I'm going through all the different things and nothing sounds like it. And then I hit narcissism and I'm just like, well, some of it sounds like it could be it. And then I just kind of read up on it for the next couple of days, just any video I could watch on YouTube or any articles or anything. And I hit this article and it said, "A day in the life with my narcissistic husband." And it was like somebody wrote my life. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
this is it. Like, this is it. And so then I was like, okay, so how do we fix this? Like, what's the cure? Whatever. And then everything I'm pulling up is saying, run, get out, leave. It doesn't change, all this. And I'm just like heartbroken because I'm like, this isn't good. This is
Yeah.
not, but there was a lot of things that I was reading about it that I'm like, well, he's not like that, um, but I mean, the more extreme things. So that's kind of how I put it together. Nobody ever told me what narcissism was. Nobody ever,
Right.
no red flags. And, and you have to, if you go further back to like when we were, excuse me, first getting together and stuff, you have to think about everybody in that church raised him.
Mm-hmm.
There were his Sunday school teachers and his, you know, youth leaders and whatever else. And these are people who had watched him grow up in the church, leave the church, stray so far away. They were praying for him all the
Mm-hmm.
time. There was a little old lady in that church was his Sunday school teacher, and that woman prayed for him like every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he came back into the church, the whole church was excited and happy because
Rejoice.
you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing the prodigal son come home.
Yeah.
So there was nobody to be looking for red flags or to
Right.
say anything. And again, I think that he was in the right place, heart posture wise, humility wise, all of that. I think he was in the right place at that point. But along the way, you had choices to make when you got up every day, and
Yeah.
slowly over time you've made the decision to turn to away or to do it on your own out of
Mm-hmm.
pride or whatever. And eventually we got to, where we ended up.
Yeah. S- So with all that being said, everything that you've experienced and seeing how, I mean, at the end of the day, anyone who doesn't want to be helped is never going to be helped. Like they
Mhm.
just can't get
Right.
helped, right? What is it that you've learned that you can share that could help someone avoid 2 decades of their life if they were to take heed to what you've been through and what you would share to someone else? What would that be?
Um, I just think education is so important. I mean, I just parents, please talk to your kids, especially if you've raised them in like a sheltered kind of
Mm-hmm.
environment. Um, I do think God's way is the only way. There's nothing wrong with being selective. There's nothing wrong with not dating a lot of people. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, but I think that young women today, I think, need to spend time on figuring their own self out first. If I had really taken some time, um, I needed therapy for what I had experienced at home before I ever got into a marriage. I wasn't put together and whole either. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize it. Um, but I mean, again, these are things that could have been handled inside of a marriage. It wasn't, divorce worthy or anything like that. Um, I just education. Read
Yeah.
up on personality disorders. Read up on. I know it may sound silly to some people, but if I had just known, like I had nothing to I did not even know the word red flag. I did not even know what one of those meant, what one of those would
Mm-hmm.
be. Um, and I think that the other thing I've said already before is um, don't lose yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you spend time on the front end, uh, you know, knowing who you are and what you want out of life, and
Mm-hmm.
only dating people who line up with that religiously, spiritually, politically, you know, how many kids y'all want, all the things. You know, if there's an area where you don't line up, it ain't it. And it's just you need to be strong enough to end that and walk away, and you need to do it early on. You know,
Yes.
if by date three you're already seeing that, hey, this person wants to stay in this town the rest of their life, and I'm wanting to move out here and be closer to this friend or that family member or whatever, you don't align. And so, you know, if this person believes in, you know, X, Y, and Z, and I believe in this over here, faith wise, we're not going to align, you know,
Yeah.
and, you know, that scripture in the Bible where it says we should not be, don't be, you know, unequally yoked. That's not just
Hmm.
spiritually, you know,
Yep.
and I didn't learn that until later on in life either. You know,
Right.
it comes in all of these different areas.
Yeah.
And so I think if you spend time, you know, making sure you've addressed any of your own issues. A lot of these young ladies and men too are coming out of homes that are broken already.
Yeah.
They haven't had a father, or maybe they haven't had a mother to or a you know, married parents in the household every day to really show them a healthy relationship. You know, they have their own issues from the way they were raised. You know,
Yeah.
just spend some time, go to a therapist, spend some time
Yes.
counseling with the pastor too, you know, get it from all sides. And, you know, just, you know, there's nothing wrong with not dating for a while. um,
Yes.
and spending some time really facing your own self and what you might have that might cause problems in a marriage. And then keep your eyes open, look out for, don't just fall into love. Don't just let it overtake you. Don't just be overcome with the emotions and the fun and the niceness and the gifts or whatever that might come your way. You need to keep your head on your shoulders and think logically. There's times to be emotional later on. You can be all gushy and mushy after, you know, further down the line. But I mean, you know, that's something that I would say that I've learned is, you know, is more about, you know, men are very logical and we get into the emotion of it and we get taken advantage of, I think, because we do not stay in our mind and our head
Hmm.
and we don't uh see the facts for what they are. We try to excuse them away because we like this person or we like the way they make us feel or how they talk to us or whatever. It don't matter. None of that matters. We need to be on uh, a journey or a hunt for the person that lines up in all these different areas, and we need to have that clipboard and these are the things. And you know, date one, you know, we want to be all just, oh, we're just having fun. No, we need to be having some serious conversations. We need to be asking some questions. We need to be doing some interviews these first couple dates. And if you don't measure up, it doesn't matter how you're making me feel. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, we don't agree in this area and we don't agree in that area. And, you know, doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make me a bad person. You know, I've had a guy that started talking to me, and we want different things in life, you
Hmm.
know, and we never ended up going on a date, but we talked several times and um uh it was going towards that direction. But I just told him, I'm like, there's no need to waste our time or your money on taking me out or anything like that. I said, because I can tell you, I know I have not dated. I've only dated one person since my divorce, and it's been almost 7 years. And I've done that intentionally because and only dated that person two times. I've done that intentionally because I want to spend time figuring myself out. You
Mm.
know, I've been going to counseling and I've been
Yeah.
going to therapy and I've been reading books and I've been spending time with me, and I'm not there yet. And when
Mm.
I am, I'll put myself out there. But right now, I'm trying to figure out exactly what do I want? How am I going to get
Mm.
there? And when I do get there and when I am in the better situation, like to be closer to that, then you know, then I'll put myself out there. But right now, if you want to step to me and talk to me, we can talk. But I mean, if you start saying things about where you're at and what you're doing and where you want to head, you know, in the next few years or whatever, if it doesn't line up with what I want for me, I'm not sacrificing that just to be with you and to say I
Yeah.
have a husband or a boyfriend or whatever. And
Mm.
the guy that I told that to was flabbergasted, could not believe that I would seriously just not date him at all, not even give him a chance, because I could already see that our visions for the future did not line up.
Doggone.
And that's,
Mm.
that's what I would say is figure your own self out first. If
Yeah.
that means not dating for 2, 3, 4 years, so be it. It is not the end of the world. Men are
Yes.
not falling off this planet. There are going to be plenty here 10 years from now that there are here now, and hopefully they'll be better off than they are better than they are now. But know what you want first. Know what I just put a lot of my focus on I just want to be married and have kids. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that for women. I want that for women. I think it's good for our society as a whole for us to be that way. But it's not everything. Like you don't want to lose yourself
Yeah.
in that process. And you still want to have, you know, your family, your hobbies, your friends,
Mm-hmm.
your,
Mm-hmm.
where do you want to go live on a mountain in Montana somewhere? If that's your dream, then you need to find somebody who's like-minded like that. If
Mm-hmm.
and not somebody who wants to live in New York City because hey, guess what? This isn't going to work. Somebody's not going to be happy. And
Yeah.
it might take you 20 guys to find the one that wants to live on a mountain in Montana, but guess what? He's out there somewhere and you'll find him eventually. And if you don't, go live on a mountain in Montana for yourself.
Do it anyways, 'cause that's what you wanted to do.
But if I learned anything, I think it's that is that just, you know, um, yourself, figure
Yeah.
yourself out first. Do not negotiate on these things that are the
Mm.
major important things for you. Um, you know, religion's a big one, politics, of course, is a big one. Where you're going to live is a big one. How many kids you're going to have, the things you need to really know what you want out of life, and don't get into the emotions until you have figured out logically of is this the person that matches up with that. And the
Mm-hmm.
minute that they are not showing that it's over, it's done. And when we don't need to make excuses or wish and hope and pray and
Ooh.
cross our fingers that it's going to change, because people are who they are, especially when my age. I mean, you've already figured out who you are. You've already decided who you are.
Yeah.
And it's not too hard to figure that out now. It's harder when you're younger. You
Yeah.
don't know where you're going or what you're going to be exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
but and then of course, just don't tolerate abuse of any form.
Mm-hmm.
Um Separate yourself from it, I think, early. Um I often think back, if I had really stood up and just been like, I'm not taking this, I'm not putting up with this. If I had been very, you know, uh, forceful or whatever about that in the beginning, I do wonder, would it have been different?
Mm-hmm.
Because I I gave a lot of room for this all to happen because I was silent, because I was cooperative and complicit and just went along with it because I did not want arguing. I just wanted a
Right.
happy home. I wanted everybody to get along, and I wanted the opposite of what I had growing up.
Yeah.
And I got that, but I got a lot of stuff I didn't want, and I lost myself in the process.
Well, that's all we needed to hear, because you hit so many gems in that closing argument. If somebody don't want to hear it, it's because they don't want to hear it. They want to
Yeah,
keep going down the wrong path on purpose. But that I don't even have to reiterate anything you just said. Everything you just said is so important. But if I had to pick one thing, stand 10 toes down on, it would be what you said, in the fact of find out who you are and what you want first.
yeah,
And then everything else, like you said, if the holes don't line up with the pegs and vice versa,
yeah,
don't even waste y'all's time.
yeah.
Kristi, I want to say I appreciate your whole life, girl. I appreciate your whole life. I love this conversation, and I'm so glad that you decided to have it, even with well, I didn't experience any of that.
Yeah.
This conversation is just as important because there's so many people who have lost who God created them to be
Mhm.
and the light that God created them to shine because they're trying to go along and get along. They're trying to be okay with everything that was never meant to be okay. And you are an example that even though you can learn through these experiences, sometimes experience doesn't have to be the best teacher. How about we
Mhm.
just start letting other people's experiences be our best teacher
Yeah.
and have the conversations? Because I mean, communication is so very important. And you showed that today,
Yeah.
that what you've experienced all could have been avoided, if we're
Yeah.
being honest, simply from healthy conversations along the way
Yeah.
and having the confidence and the courage to acknowledge something that doesn't feel right to us or something that we could easily brush up under the rug. Well, let's just talk about it and see how you respond,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
if we get that far.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your
I feel like we didn't.
transparency.
I feel like there's so much we didn't cover, but
Girl, do
uh,
we need to do a part
but
two? Because I got some part twos up here. If we need to do a part two, say the word. And because so much we didn't cover sound like we need a part two.
well, we talked about the first part, but I mean, you're talking about 2 decades and stuff. But
See, okay,
but
okay. Y'all hear this? It's a part two coming. So
I don't
y'all
know about
just hold on.
that.
This ain't gonna be the last of Kristi.
I
We
don't
gonna
know.
reschedule and get this
We'll
thing
see.
popping.
Yeah, I think
But
too. I will say is that I think that um there's a lot of uh when you look at some of the other examples or other people's relationships and stuff like that and everything, there's a lot of uh I think you can pick up on some of when I hear some of other people's stories, it's like, well, you could clearly see that
you saw that
person
coming.
was being, the man was very mean in the way he talked to you and all kinds of stuff. And like I didn't have any of that.
Right.
He wasn't calling me names. He wasn't, not until the end. The end was not good. But I think that's another thing I would point out to people is, you know, these people are um experts
Yes.
at what they're doing. And um, the devil's in there too. And when he's in there, he's good at manipulating and
Mm-hmm.
you know, making things appear like they what they aren't. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the other thing. I think it's again, it goes back to what I just said. We've got to stay logical. We just
Yeah.
fall into love too easy, into the
Mm-hmm.
emotions of it all, and
Mm-hmm.
we have to stay logical.
Yeah.
But they say what men take like 0.2 seconds to decide like what bucket they're putting us in after seeing us or
Mm.
meeting us or whatever. We're either in the um, you know, one night stand bucket, or we're
Mm-hmm.
in the date for a little while bucket, or we're the marriage material bucket,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't do that. We just like,
Yeah.
come on in, come on in. Do you make me feel good? Do we get along okay? All right. Let me start cooking and doing your laundry. And I mean, we just fall right into it so much. And we don't make any of these guys work for anything in a relationship. Like to get in a relationship, but you know what they're doing? They're saying logical, and they're saying 0.2 seconds, check. I know exactly what I'm gonna do with you. And we don't
Yes.
we don't do that. We don't do that.
Girl,
And I mean,
you said
they
what you said there.
they say it's a game, and guess what? We are losing when we play with that kind of strategy. We are going to lose. We are going to
Yes.
lose because we're going to run
Yes.
across a lot of, especially this day and age. But
Yeah.
but stay logical. But yeah, it is different. Every situation is different, and you can be in a situation where it's very clear and easy to see this man does not love me, this man does not care about me, but you do get somebody like mine where
Mm-hmm.
you know I would have bet my life that this man loved me 1,000%,
Wow.
and I think he did in the beginning. I think
Yeah.
At the very, very beginning, I do think he did. This man would defend me. He has called his mama off of me at times in
Yeah.
ways she spoke to me and stuff like that. And he wasn't gonna let, I would say up to the end, I don't think he would have let anybody disrespect me, but I mean he was doing
Yeah.
but you just have to really keep your eyes open because it can be somebody who's smiling at you that you think loves you 1,000% and decides, in a matter of minutes or days or years or whatever, they just stop choosing you, or they
Yeah.
never chose you from the beginning, and maybe it looked like they did, so you really do have to, keep your eyes open and
Yeah.
just educate yourself. But
For sure. For sure. Well, I appreciate all of the advice, all of the
yeah,
wisdom, from your experience. And I hope that people take your experience and apply it to their lives so they don't have to experience for themselves to find out that you
yeah.
know what you're talking about. Um, well, we're gonna do a part two. I'm just going
We'll
because I
talk
feel it.
after
Yeah,
you
I feel
finish
it.
recording. We'll
I
talk.
feel it. Shoot, doggone. Y'all, thank you for hanging in there. It's been another amazing one in the books. I'm so excited about all of the people that this is going to reach and all of the people that this is going to help. Kristi, keep showing up, keep sharing your love, keep shining your light. In the meantime, in between time, y'all know what it is. We are gone. Pew, 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 pew.
Get you some music, girl.